So glad that you clicked. By the end of this video, you will be glad you did too.
I always believed that marriage was a fortress built on two things: trust and sleep. For 3 years, Marcus and I had plenty of both. He was a project manager for a construction firm in Denver. I was a freelance graphic designer who worked from our converted attic office. We had a routine that felt like armor: dinner at 7, a walk around the block at 8, bed by 10. And every single night, Marcus would reach under his nightstand, pull out a small black camera, and point it at our bed. "For safety," he'd say, his voice soft and rehearsed. "You never know. Break-ins happen. If someone comes in while we're sleeping, we'll have proof." I laughed the first time. "You're such a paranoid, Marcus. We're in a gated community. The worst thing that's happened here is Mrs. Henderson's cat got into the wrong garage." He didn't laugh back. His fingers tightened around the camera, his knuckles white. "Humor me, Elena. Please. It's not paranoia if it keeps us safe." I humored him. For 8 months, I humored him. The little red light blinked in the corner of our bedroom like a third eye, watching us breathe. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd stare at it and wonder what Marcus saw when he reviewed the footage. Me, tossing and turning. Me, reaching for water. Me, drooling slightly onto my pillow. It was mundane. It was us. It was love with a security blanket. But love, I learned, is just a word people use when they don't want to say lie. It started with a Tuesday that felt like a Monday. I was working on a logo for a local brewery, my eyes burning from too much screen time, when my laptop crashed. Not a gentle freeze, a violent blue screen death that spat error codes like a dying animal. I swore, slammed the lid, and remembered Marcus's old laptop in the hall closet. He'd upgraded 6 months ago but kept the old one, for backups. I figured I could use it to finish my draft and transfer files later. The closet smelled like cedar and dust. Marcus's old laptop sat on a shelf above a box of winter coats, wrapped in a static-free bag like it was something precious. I grabbed it, powered it on, and waited through the slow boot sequence. The desktop was clean. Too clean. Just a recycling bin and a single folder labeled Home. I clicked it. Inside were subfolders organized by date: January, February, March. Each one contained video files, hundreds of them. I clicked on one at random: March 15th, and my own face filled the screen. Me, asleep. The camera angle was wide, capturing the entire bed. Marcus was beside me, his back to the lens, also apparently asleep. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m. I fast-forwarded. Nothing happened for 2 hours. Then, at 12:58 a.m., Marcus moved. He sat up. Not the jerky motion of a nightmare, a calm, deliberate rise. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. He looked at me. Then he looked at the camera. And he smiled. Not a loving smile, a performer's smile. The kind you give when you know you're being watched. He stood, walked to the closet, and pulled out clothes I'd never seen him wear: a black jacket, dark jeans, a baseball cap pulled low. He dressed silently, efficiently, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Then he walked out of the bedroom. The front door opened and closed with a soft click. The timestamp read 1:02 a.m. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I fast-forwarded. 2 hours of empty bed. Then, at 3:58 a.m., the front door opened again. Marcus walked in, still in the black jacket and cap. He undressed in the closet, hung the clothes back on the same hanger, and slipped into bed. He arranged himself in the exact position he'd left, closed his eyes. And at 4:01 a.m., he woke up, turned to me, and pulled me close. "Sleep well?" he'd whisper, his voice thick with fake grogginess. I clicked through more files. January, February, March, April. The same pattern. Every single night. Some nights he left at 1 a.m., some nights at 2. But he always returned by 4, always dressed the same, always smiling at the camera before he left. The camera wasn't for our safety. It was for his alibi. I didn't confront him. That was the first rule of survival I learned from my father, a man who'd spent 20 years as a private investigator before drinking himself to death. Never accuse without evidence. Never show your hand before you know the game. I waited. 3 days. I smiled at breakfast. I kissed him goodbye when he left for work. I commented on the weather and asked about his projects. And every night, when he set up the camera and kissed my forehead, I pretended to fall into the same deep, trusting sleep. On the 4th day, while Marcus was at a site inspection that I now knew was probably a lie, I tore our house apart. I started with his nightstand, the drawer where he kept his wallet, his keys, his emergency flashlight. Under the flashlight, taped to the bottom of the drawer, I found a second hard drive, smaller than the one in the closet, encrypted. I didn't have the password, but I had something better. Time. I moved to his closet. I checked every pocket of every jacket, every pair of pants. In the black jacket, the one from the videos, I found a valet ticket from a place called The Velvet Room. No address. Just a phone number and a stamp that read, "Parking validated." I checked his dresser. In the sock drawer, behind a row of neatly folded athletic socks, I found a stack of receipts. Casino receipts. Not from Vegas or Atlantic City. Local. Underground. The kind that don't have logos, just handwritten totals and initials. The numbers made my stomach drop. $12,400, $8,900, $15,200, $22,000. Each receipt was dated. Each date matched a night from the videos. I kept digging. In the garage, behind a stack of paint cans, I found a metal lockbox. No key. I took it to the kitchen, grabbed a hammer from the junk drawer, and smashed the lock. Inside were papers. Not love letters, not photos of another woman. Debt agreements, handwritten, signed in Marcus's neat, careful script. The first one was dated 14 months ago. The amount, $50,000. The lender, someone named V. Kowalski. The interest rate, 15% per month. The collateral, personal guarantee. No legal recourse. The second agreement was for $75,000, dated 8 months ago. Same lender, same terms. The third was for $120,000, dated 3 months ago. The fourth was the worst, dated 2 weeks ago. The amount, $95,000. But this one had a different clause at the bottom, written in a different hand, blocky and aggressive. Final extension. Full collection due 30 days. Non-payment will result in permanent resolution. No further negotiation. I sat on the garage floor, the papers scattered around me like fallen leaves, and did the math. $340,000. Plus 15% interest compounding monthly. Marcus wasn't just gambling, he was drowning. And the men he owed weren't the kind who sent reminder emails. The camera, the footage of us sleeping, the careful alibi. He wasn't protecting us from burglars. He was protecting himself from the moment they came to collect. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the debt agreement spread in front of me, a pot of coffee growing cold, and planned. Marcus came home at 6, his face flushed with the cold, his eyes bright with the lie of a normal day. "Hey, babe," he said, kissing my cheek. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone harder. "Just working on a deadline. Big client." "That's my girl," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Grinding hard. I love that about you." He went upstairs to shower. I heard the water turn on, heard him humming some tuneless song, and I felt a rage so pure it could have powered a city. I love that about you. He loved that I worked hard. He loved that I earned money. He loved that our joint savings account, the one we'd built for a house, for children, for a future was sitting at $347,000 just 2 years ago. I pulled out my phone and checked the balance. $7,200. He'd been transferring it in chunks. Investments, he'd told me. A friend has a startup. Great returns. I'd believed him. I'd signed the transfer forms. I'd trusted him with our future because that's what wives do. The water turned off. I gathered the papers, hid them in my office, and was back at the table with a smile when he came down in his robe, hair wet, face scrubbed clean of whatever guilt he might have felt. "What's for dinner?" he asked. "Pasta," I said. "Your favorite." The next morning, I called in sick to my client. I told them I had a family emergency. Then I drove to the address on the valet ticket. The Velvet Room wasn't in Denver. It was in a warehouse district 30 minutes south, surrounded by auto shops and abandoned factories. The building had no sign, no windows, just a steel door with a camera above it and a buzzer that looked like it could electrocute you. I didn't go in. I parked across the street in a diner lot and watched. At 2 p.m., a black Escalade pulled up. Two men got out. Both wore suits that cost more than my car. One was tall, thin, with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his ear to his jaw. The other was shorter, wider, with hands that looked like they could crush walnuts. They went inside. They didn't buzz. They had a key. I waited. 3 hours. Cars came and went. Men in expensive suits. Women in dresses that left nothing to imagination. No one looked happy. Everyone looked desperate. At 5 p.m., I drove home. I had a name, the Velvet Room. I had a lender, V. Kowalski. I had a debt, $340,000 plus interest. And I had a husband who thought I was too trusting to ever look under the floorboards. He was wrong. That night, Marcus set up the camera as usual. He kissed my forehead. "Sleep tight, Elena. I'll keep us safe." "You're my hero," I whispered, and the words tasted like ash. I waited until his breathing evened out. Then I waited another hour. At 1:30 a.m., he sat up. He dressed in his black jacket and cap. He smiled at the camera. And he left. I counted to 300. Then I got up, pulled on jeans and a hoodie, and followed him. He drove his truck, the one he used for site inspections, to the same warehouse district. He parked 2 blocks from the Velvet Room, checked his mirrors 3 times, and walked the rest of the way. I followed at a distance, my heart in my throat, my phone recording everything. He didn't go in the front door. He went around back, to a loading dock where a man in a security uniform checked his ID and waved him through. I couldn't follow, but I didn't need to. I had enough. I drove home. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I created a new folder. I called it Insurance. The next day, I hired a private investigator, not some cheap gumshoe from a strip mall. I called the firm my father had worked for 20 years ago, back when he was sober and respected. The receptionist remembered his name. The senior partner, a woman named Diane Cross, remembered his face. "Elena Voss," she said when I sat in her office, the debt agreement spread on her desk. "Your father was good people. Before the bottle got him. What do you need?" I told her everything. The camera, the videos, the debts, the Velvet Room. She listened without interrupting, her pen scratching notes, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're not here to save him," she said when I finished. It wasn't a question. "I'm here to save myself," I said, "and to make sure he never does this to anyone else." Diane smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who recognized another predator. "I can help with that, but it's going to cost you." "I have $7,200 in our joint account," I said, "and I have skills, design, marketing, social media. I can work." "I don't want your money," Diane said. "I want your cooperation and your silence. Can you give me both?" "For how long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. "Can you play the loving wife for 3 more weeks?" I thought of Marcus, of his smile, of his hand on my shoulder, his lips on my cheek, his voice saying, "I love that about you," while he bled us dry. "I can play anything you need," I said. Diane's team moved fast. Within a week, they had the full picture. The Velvet Room was an underground casino run by a man named Viktor Kowalski, a Polish immigrant who'd built a gambling empire in Colorado's shadows. He had connections to organized crime in Chicago, money laundering operations in Miami, and a reputation for collecting debts with methods that didn't leave scars where people could see them. Marcus, they discovered, had started as a casual player, a Friday night thing, a few $100s, then a few thousand. Then he'd discovered the high-stakes room, the private tables, the adrenaline of betting more than he earned in a month. He'd lost $50,000 in a single night. Kowalski's people had been gentle at first. Payment plans, friendly reminders. Then the interest compounded. Then the threats started. Then the camera. The camera was his idea. Diane told me when we met at a coffee shop across town, her voice low. Kowalski's people suggested it. If Marcus could prove he was home every night, sleeping peacefully, no one would suspect him of running. It bought him time. It bought them leverage. If he disappeared, the footage would show a man with no reason to flee. A man with a happy marriage. A man who'd never gamble away his future. And if he couldn't pay? I asked. Then the footage becomes something else, Diane said. Evidence of a man who had everything and threw it away. A man who lied to his wife. A man who deserves whatever happens to him. Kowalski's people use it to control him, to break him, to make sure he keeps digging deeper, trying to win back what he lost until there's nothing left. And then? Diane's eyes were flat. Then they take what he has left. His kidneys, his liver, his life. Whatever's worth more than the debt. I sipped my coffee. It was cold. I didn't care. What do I do? You do what wives do best, Diane said. You clean house. But this time, you keep what you find. The plan was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Diane had a contact in the IRS, a forensic accountant who owed her a favor from a case 15 years ago. He would audit Marcus's investments, trace the money transfers, document the fraud. She had a contact in the Denver PD's organized crime unit, a detective named Ruiz, who'd been trying to build a case against Kowalski for 3 years. He needed evidence. I had evidence. I just needed to get it to him without Kowalski's people knowing. And I had one more card to play. A card Marcus didn't know I held. The second hard drive. The encrypted one from his nightstand. It took Diane's tech guy 4 days to crack it. When he did, he called me at midnight, his voice shaking with excitement or fear. I couldn't tell which. Elena, he said, you need to see this. I drove to his apartment, a sterile loft downtown with more monitors than furniture. He sat me in front of a screen and pressed play. The footage was different from the bedroom camera. This was handheld, shaky, shot in low light. It showed the inside of the Velvet Room, the high-stakes tables, the private rooms, and most importantly, the faces. Kowalski, sitting at a bar, counting stacks of cash, his lieutenants, making deals, shaking hands, exchanging envelopes, politicians, police officers, businessmen, all caught on camera by a man who'd been desperate enough to wear a wire, to record his own crimes, to build an insurance policy against the very people who owned him. Marcus was recording them, the tech guy said. Every night. He wasn't just gambling. He was gathering evidence, blackmail material. He thought if he had enough, he could buy his way out. Or he could use it if they killed him, I said quietly. Yeah, the tech guy said. Or that. I stared at the screen. Marcus, my husband, the man who smiled at cameras and lied to my face, had been playing a deeper game than I realized. He wasn't just a gambler. He was a desperate man trying to build a life raft while drowning in an ocean of his own making. It didn't make me love him, but it made me understand him. And understanding, I knew, was the first step toward true destruction. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I transferred the $7,200 from our joint account to a private account Diane helped me set up. I gathered every receipt, every debt agreement, every piece of footage. I documented everything. I built a case so solid that no lawyer in the world could break it. And I played the loving wife. I made Marcus's favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I let him set up the camera every night and smiled when he kissed my forehead. I even initiated sex one night, just to see if he could still perform while lying to my face. He could. That was the worst part. He could look into my eyes, whisper my name, and never once show the guilt that should have been eating him alive. On the 14th night of my performance, Marcus came home early. His face was gray, his hands shaking. He sat at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking, "I need to tell you something." I sat across from him, my heart hammering, my face a mask of concern. "What is it, baby? You're scaring me." "I've made mistakes," he said. "Big ones, financial ones. I thought I could fix them. I thought I could win it back. But I can't. And now they're coming for me. For us. I need you to know, whatever happens, I love you. I always loved you. The camera, the recordings, they were to protect you. To prove you had nothing to do with it. If they come, if they hurt me, you need to show them the footage. You need to prove you didn't know." He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was slick with sweat. His eyes were wet with tears that might have been real. "I need you to trust me," he said. "One more time. Can you do that?" I looked at him, at the man I'd married, at the man who'd stolen our future, at the man who was still trying to manipulate me, even now, even with his back against the wall. "I trust you," I said, and the lie felt like victory. "We'll get through this. Together." He broke down. He sobbed into my shoulder, his body shaking, his tears soaking my shirt. I held him. I patted his back. I whispered soothing words. And I thought of the folder on my laptop labeled insurance. I thought of Detective Ruiz, waiting for my call. I thought of Victor Kowalski, sitting in his warehouse empire, unaware that his most desperate debtor had become his most dangerous enemy. "Sleep," I told Marcus, guiding him to bed. "We'll figure it out in the morning." He slept. I didn't. I sat at the kitchen table and made my final preparations. The next morning, I made 3 calls. The first was to Detective Ruiz. I gave him the address of the Velvet Room. I gave him the names from Marcus's footage. I gave him enough evidence to build a RICO case that would put Kowalski away for 20 years. I told him when to move. Friday night, at 2 a.m., when the high-stakes room was full and the cash was flowing, and Kowalski's arrogance would be at its peak. The second call was to the IRS forensic accountant. I gave him Marcus's bank records, the transfer documentation, the fake investment paperwork. I told him Marcus had committed fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. I told him where to find the rest. In our home office, in a locked filing cabinet, behind the bookshelf. The third call was to a divorce lawyer, the best in Denver, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in cases involving financial fraud and criminal activity. I told her I wanted everything: the house, the car, the remaining assets. And I wanted Marcus to pay restitution for every dollar he'd stolen. "Can you make that happen?" I asked. "With the evidence you've gathered?" Sarah said. "I can make him wish he'd never met you." "Good," I said. "That's exactly what I want." Friday night arrived like a storm front. Marcus was agitated, pacing the house, checking his phone every 30 seconds. He told me he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after midnight. I kissed him goodbye and told him to be safe. At 1 a.m., I followed him. Not in my car, in Diane's, a nondescript sedan with tinted windows and a GPS tracker she'd installed. I watched him park 2 blocks from the Velvet Room. I watched him walk to the loading dock. I watched him disappear inside. Then I drove to the police station and met Detective Ruiz. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his team gearing up in the parking lot, body armor reflecting the streetlights. "Once we move, there's no going back. Your husband goes down with the rest." "I'm sure," I said. "He made his choices. He can live with them." Ruiz nodded. He didn't look happy. He looked tired. You know, I've seen a lot of informants, a lot of wives who turned on their husbands. Most of them are angry, vengeful. You don't look angry, Mrs. Voss. You look calm. I spent 3 weeks being angry, I said. Now I'm just done. The raid was surgical. Ruiz's team hit the front and back simultaneously. I watched from a command van 3 blocks away, listening to the radio chatter, hearing the shouts and the crashes and the sudden silence of men who'd been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Kowalski was arrested. His lieutenants, his accountants, his security team, and Marcus. They found him in the high-stakes room, a stack of chips in front of him, a drink in his hand, his face frozen in an expression that wasn't fear or guilt. It was relief. The relief of a man who'd been running for so long that being caught felt like finally stopping. They found the hard drive in his jacket pocket. The one with the footage. The one he'd been planning to use as leverage, or as a last resort. Ruiz's people took it as evidence. They didn't know about the copy I had. The copy Diane's tech guy had made. The copy that was already on its way to the FBI's Organized Crime Division, with a note explaining how a desperate gambler had accidentally built the case of a lifetime. Marcus was charged with gambling offenses, fraud, and conspiracy. The state added tax evasion and embezzlement. Kowalski's people, facing RICO charges that could put them away for life, started talking. They talked about Marcus's debts. They talked about his desperation. They talked about the camera in his bedroom, the alibi he'd built, the wife he'd been planning to sacrifice if things went wrong. I wasn't mentioned. Not by name. I was the wife, the victim, the innocent party. Just like Marcus had planned. But I wasn't innocent. And I wasn't done. The divorce was finalized in 6 weeks. Sarah Chen was a shark in human clothing. She got me the house, the car, half of what remained of Marcus's 401k, the part he hadn't gambled away, and a court order for restitution. He would pay me $2,000 a month for the next 15 years, or until the $340,000 was repaid, whichever came first. He wouldn't be paying from prison wages. He'd be paying from the book deal. That was my final move. The one Diane hadn't planned. The one I'd thought of myself, lying awake at night while Marcus slept beside me, his breathing even, his conscience clear. I contacted a journalist, a woman named Maya Torres who wrote for a national investigative magazine. I gave her the story, not the police version, the real version, the camera, the debt, the betrayal, the revenge. I gave her the footage, the bedroom footage, edited to protect my privacy, showing only Marcus's comings and goings. I gave her the debt agreements, I gave her the receipts, and I gave her Marcus. The man who gambled away his marriage, the headline read, How One Husband's Secret Addiction Led to an Underground Empire's Downfall, and One Wife's Brilliant Revenge. The story went viral. It was picked up by newspapers, websites, talk shows. Everyone wanted to interview me. I said no to all of them. I let the story speak for itself. I let Marcus's face, his mugshot, his courtroom photos, his walk of shame from the police van, become the symbol of everything wrong with secrets and lies. The book deal followed. A publisher offered Marcus $100,000 for his memoir. My Life in the Shadows, A Gambler's Confession. He took it. He needed the money for legal fees. He wrote it in prison on yellow legal pads, his handwriting shaky from withdrawal and regret. It was a bestseller. Not because it was good, because it was true, because people love to watch a man fall, especially when he falls from a height he built on someone else's back. And every quarter, when the royalty checks came in, they went to me. Court-ordered restitution, 15 years of payments, funded by the story of his own destruction. I sold the house 6 months later. Too many memories. Too many nights of lying still while a camera blinked in the corner. I bought a condo downtown, near the art district. I started a new design firm. I hired 3 employees. I dated, casually, nothing serious. I learned to sleep without checking for cameras. Sometimes, late at night, I'd get an email from Marcus. From prison. apologies, excuses, promises that he'd changed, that he was getting help, that he still loved me. I never replied. I had an autofilter set up. His emails went to a folder I never opened, a digital graveyard for a dead marriage. Once, a year after the raid, I drove past the Velvet Room. The building was empty, boarded up, a for-lease sign hanging crooked from the front door. I parked and sat for a while, watching the wind blow trash across the loading dock where Marcus had disappeared so many nights. I thought about the camera, about his smile, about the way he'd kissed my forehead and said, "Sleep tight," while planning to sacrifice me to his debt. I thought about the moment I'd found the hard drive, the moment I'd realized that the man I loved was a stranger, the moment I'd decided that being a victim was a choice, and I chose something else. I started the car and drove away. I didn't look back. There was nothing there worth seeing. Marcus got out after 4 years. Good behavior. Overcrowding. A system that rewards patience more than penance. I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't read the articles. I was in Paris when it happened, on a design conference, drinking wine on a balcony overlooking the Seine, my phone turned off, my mind somewhere else entirely. When I got back, there was a letter waiting at my condo. Handwritten, no return address. I almost threw it away unopened. But something made me curious. Something made me want to see what he had to say, now that it was over. Now that the debt was paid and the story was told and the cameras were finally, truly off. I opened it on my balcony, the Denver sunset painting the sky in colors I'd learned to appreciate again. "Elena," it read, "I know you won't respond. I know you don't owe me anything. But I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did. I understand what you did. And I understand that the only person I have to blame is myself. The camera wasn't for your safety. It was for mine. The lies weren't to protect you. They were to protect me. I gambled away our money, our trust, our future. But you gambled on yourself. And you won. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying, you were always the stronger one. I see that now. I should have seen it then. I'm sorry. For all of it. Marcus." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope, and put it in my desk drawer. Not because I forgave him. Not because I missed him. But because it was evidence. Final proof that the game was over. That I'd won. That the house always wins. But this time, the house was me. I met someone new 2 years later. His name was David. He was an architect. He built things instead of tearing them down. He didn't own a camera. He didn't have debts. He didn't smile at things that weren't funny. On our 6th-month anniversary, he gave me a key to his apartment. "For when you're ready," he said. "No pressure, no cameras. Just, when you're ready." I took it. I used it. I slept there, in his bed, with no blinking red light in the corner. I woke up to sunlight instead of surveillance. I learned to trust again. Not because I was naive, but because I'd earned the right to be careful without being afraid. Sometimes, when David traveled for work, I'd set up a camera in my condo. Not for safety, for art. I'd record the empty rooms, the shifting light, the silence of a space that was mine and only mine. I'd edit the footage into short films. Abstract, beautiful, honest. I showed one at a gallery opening. A critic called it a meditation on privacy and presence. A buyer offered $5,000 for the original. I sold it. I donated the money to a gambling addiction helpline. Not for Marcus, for whoever came next. For the person who might be where I was, lying in the dark, listening to a husband breathe, wondering if the camera in the corner was protection or prison. I wanted them to know, the camera sees what you point it at, but you choose where to point it. You choose what to record. You choose what to remember. And when the time comes, you choose whether to be the footage or the filmmaker. I chose to be the filmmaker. The end.